But it should have really been called Story Time with Tony Chris. Seriously, all we did in there was tell stories and learn to tell them well. But you know what? That was one of the best courses I've ever taken. I know a lot of my classmates would say the same thing. We heard so many memorable stories. So many stories that were so moving, profound, inspiring, many coming from Tony. But one of the stories that wasn't that, but still really memorable, was the silly one Tony told about his son when he was potty training him. And he practically took a shower in a public urinal. And you know what I've come to accept with that story, as silly as it is? I can't forget it. I cannot forget that story. I feel like every time I walk into a bathroom, see a massive urinal like the one Tony described, I'm taken back to that story, his son, the shenanigans that went on in that first public bathroom experience. And I get excited to potty train my kids, of course, someday. But that story it's as though it's a part of me now. I can't get rid of it. Everywhere I go, even the bathroom, the story's right there with me. And so it is, I believe, not only with silly bathroom tales, but with stories of all kinds. Stories have the power to change people's hearts, their perspectives, their day, their life, their eternity. There's something about a story told well that sticks with people and does something to them, does something in them. God so loves a good story. And there's no story in history that has done more to change lives than the love story the Father has told through the Son. He changed my life. And he didn't do it with a Christian coming to me with a PowerPoint full of bullet points full of gospel truths. No, God got a hold of me because I heard a story about the good news of Jesus, who, though I was yet a sinner, gave up his own precious life for me. And though I was not worthy of him, he loved me, and he always will. It is this story of God's that has most stuck with me and done something to me, something in me. It is this story, and the power of this story, that has changed my heart, has changed my perspective, all my days, my life, and my eternity. Everywhere I go, yes, even the bathroom, this story is right there with me. It is a part of me now, and I long to share it with the world. Thank you for coming out and listening to our stories, which have been greatly impacted by his. Our prayer is that you'd be blessed tonight by what you hear. So ladies and gentlemen, welcome to A Night of Stories. Let's get out those s'mores, eh?
Whose job was it to bring the marshmallows?
Who's got chocolate?
Stephen had them.
I put the marshmallows in Cody's backpack.
No, the marshmallows are not in my bag.
I put them in your backpack.
They're not in
I
there.
think I saw you eating them on the way.
Okay, that's just a lie.
You can't make
No.
s'mores without marshmallows.
I don't have them.
Okay.
It's not in my bag.
We hiked 15 miles.
It's not.
Spencer, I remember when I first met you, it was through a class I teach, Faith, Living and Learning in the Humanities. And you were turning in regularly these writings that showed me that you're quite a writer. And then came an essay that recounted your struggles with drug addiction and the violence in your life, in your inner life, and how you were changed. And it was such a powerful communication of a powerful story. I was knocked out, and it was so wonderful. I asked if I could embed it in something I was writing and sending to about 100 friends. And I got so many responses, positive learning responses from your writing. And one of the persons that read it asked me, I wonder if Spencer could compare his experience with Jesus to his experience with heroin. I'd love to hear that right now.
Thank you, Dr. Clay. That is so cool to hear people responding to my thoughts. All through high school and my first years of college, I never actually wrote a full essay or tried to write anything significant. Only after transferring to Warner have I actually tried to develop writing skills, and I'm pleasantly surprised to see the impact that it's having on others. I remember telling you some of this at the beginning of this semester, that I'm growing to love writing, or at least how my heart and my passion seems to sometimes crowd into words. As far as the response to the question, comparing the experience of Jesus to the experience of heroin. Surprisingly, my experience with Jesus and heroin had some profound similarities, at least on the surface. The first time I did heroin, I remember thinking, oh man, there it is, that's what's been missing my entire life. Everything seemed okay. More than that even, it seemed perfect. And then the drug wore off and I did it again. And never again did I quite get that same profound, oh man, there it is effect. Yet I found myself quickly pushing it to the center of my life, and everything that I did revolved around obtaining and using the drug. I needed to feel full. There was nothing else I'd come across that filled me up quite like it. The second time I did it was almost just like the first, just ever so slightly less filling, almost not even noticeably. And then the third, the fourth, and the fifth times followed the same pattern. Before long, it wasn't doing much at all, but numbing me from the pain of realizing that I was becoming a worthless junkie. So my friends, upon hearing of my problem, decided to try to fix it by introducing me to the hypodermic needle. Oh man, there it is. It came back before I could even count to 10. I'm convinced that the same part of the depths of my heart that reached out to heroin for comfort is the same part that knew something's off, the same part seeking my Heavenly Father. I was like a lost child walking up to strangers asking how to get home to Daddy. Heroin, can you take me home, please? I'm lost and I need some direction, some comfort, please. I unfortunately had walked up to the wrong stranger. I had walked right up into an imposter that wanted me miserable and it wanted me dead. It was a lie. Looking back, I can see it unfolding. That first experience with the drug, when I found a meaning to life, was undermined ever so slightly with a sense of artificiality and incompleteness. It's kind of like this. That giant gaping hole in my chest, which I now understand to have been the awareness of an absence of a relationship with God, is shaped like a giant rectangle. I've been trying to fill it with these tiny artificial geometric scraps my whole life, which were just barely scratching the surface. And then heroin went in, and it was like a giant plastic square inside that rectangle. It nearly filled it up, but there was still something missing, not to mention that the plastic felt kind of funky. Even though it was radically more effective than anything else, it was still off. My first experience with Jesus and my first experience with heroin were similar, in the sense that they left me thinking, oh man, there it is, that's what's been missing this whole time. There are two noticeable differences that come to mind, however. First, Jesus was the full rectangle. I didn't even recognize the completeness in him until that leap of faith was taken. And thank God he's faithful. He also doesn't feel like artificial plastic. He feels like soul material, like he sewed in a piece of rectangle-shaped spirit right into my heart. The completeness of what was missing. Also, I found that every time the effects of heroin wore off, I found myself more and more hopeless and miserable. The marks on my arms became a more plentiful reminder of what a worthless person I was becoming. I was marching right into the grave of despair. The difference with Jesus is that once my dramatic emotional experience wore off, after my initial conversion, I was still more filled with hope and I was filled with purpose even in the darkest of times. My life is worth living and my heart is pointed towards God. The hope of his kingdom transcends worldly circumstances. When I asked heroin for directions home, Satan laughed and gave me his best shot. When I asked Jesus for directions home, he said, son, I've been waiting for you. Here, take my hand. Dad's been waiting for you for a very long time. There's still work to be done, but follow me. You're almost home.
All right.
Seriously, look in that day.
I'll search.
I told you I'd put them in there.
isn't it.
Why did you bring a
Bring this
calculator?
calculator. What are you doing?
This isn't it.
Your homework? I got time for this.
This isn't it.
This is a map of Kelso. We're in a different state, Cody.
You know, I think this reminds me of a story. When I was 18 years old, I went on this trip. It was called the Jesus Retreat, and I went to a YWAM base in Lakeside, Montana. While I was there, I thought that I had found my calling, and I thought that I knew what it was. So I moved back to Portland, and I came to Warren Pacific College, and I thought, you know what my calling is? It's youth ministry. That, after all, is what every good female Christian does, right? They lead youth ministry. They work with kids. So I got plugged in to a middle school young life in Southeast Portland. And I thought for sure this was what I was called to. And as soon as we started developing the club, I soon realized that this didn't feel right. This wasn't it. I continued on with Young Life, still thinking that somehow it would get better and somehow I would find my calling in this thing that I still wasn't sure of. We went on a training retreat to the Wildlife Center, and I thought, okay, this is the moment that I'm going to realize that this is what I'm called to. This is the moment that I'm finally going to feel that this is the thing that God has been calling me to. And that weekend was the weekend for me that said, no, this isn't actually it. And I remember being in a room surrounded by all of these young life leaders, and they were all so excited. And I remember sitting there thinking, this is great, but it's not for me. But I plugged along because I believed that this was the only way for me to fulfill my call. So I got involved working in Sun Ministry, working with middle school kids. And I remember one day I was sitting there bored, so I decided I was going to go find a copy of Harry Potter. And as I roamed around the library, I found two mischievous middle schoolers making out in the corner. This was the moment for me that I decided that middle school youth ministry was not for me. So I finally moved on from Young Life for a while. And I thought, maybe missions work is what is going to work for me. After all, I've been working with kids in Southeast Portland. It's not that much of a leap to work with kids in Southeast Asia, right? It's pretty similar. Except for the fact that I haven't ever been on a mission, and I have no idea what that looks like. So I decided to start taking the classes and start learning what it looked like to do missions work. I soon realized that wasn't the thing that I was called to. And not only that, but I found it kind of boring. But I plugged along and got most of a missions minor without knowing whether or not that's what I want to do. But I soon realized this isn't it. So I thought to myself, well, my friends are really into biblical studies. So maybe that's what I'm called to. Maybe that's what God is calling me, because it seems like that's the thing all the good, studious RCM majors like. So we had this Old Testament paper, and I can honestly say I don't remember what verse I picked. Sorry, Dr. Carver. But I remember sitting in the library looking through the commentaries, and I found this little blue commentary in the corner. And it said Women's Bible Commentary. And when I saw that, I felt a sense of relief, and I was so excited because there were finally voices like mine. And I opened it up, and I began to read it, and it didn't make me feel that way. And I realized that what these women had offered wasn't something that was helpful for me. And I realized that the voices that they brought to the table weren't ones that I could relate to. And I soon realized that this wasn't it. So I moved on, and I had the class before this one, which is our semester-long internship class, and I had the pleasure of working with a church planter. And I thought, okay, maybe this is what God is calling me to. Maybe this is the thing that I've been created for. But I started engaging this process of church planting, and it was messy, and it was hard, and it didn't fit, and it didn't feel right. And although the woman that I was working with was fantastic, it just soon realized that this wasn't it either. My time here at Warner has been filled with me trying to find the thing that fits, the thing that I've been called to. And it's been a really hard process, taking classes that have stretched me farther than I thought was possible, and going through some really hard lessons. And I've also realized that I'm not alone in this process. And it wasn't until recently that I was able to look around this campus and see hundreds of other students doing the exact same thing I was, and I no longer felt alone. It wasn't until recently that I realized that God was actually real, and that God had a calling on my life, and it wasn't about me trying to figure out what it was, but it was about me resting and realizing that God had a plan for me, whether or not I knew what it was right now. I'm no longer afraid of trying to find the thing that works right now, but I'm okay with waiting. I'm okay with taking a breath and realizing that I might not know what it is right now, and that's okay.
Yeah. During the summer of my junior year of high school, I received my calling. I received it in a crowd around 5,000 people at the Church of God's International Youth Conference. My calling came to me as an epiphany from God. It's hard to explain. It was like my whole world had been turned upside down. During the process, I remember seeing myself in a small village somewhere in South America. So from then on, I knew my calling was going to be a missionary in a cross-cultural setting of South America. During my freshman year in college, I had taken the class Exploring God's Calling. I was adamant on becoming a missionary. I loved this class so much, but what I learned in it is what helped strengthen my calling even more. We were taught to look back and to let our life speak. As we reflect on the gifts that God has blessed upon us, for instance, my love for different languages and ability to catch on to them quickly, we learned to discern our calling even more. Upon more reflection, I remembered how as a little child that I wanted to be a pastor, and how much that meant to me. As of my freshman year, I was positive what my calling was. After all, freshmen know everything, right? In Dr. John's class, Introduction to Cross-Cultural Ministry, we talked about what cross-cultural means. Not only is cross-cultural, cross-continental, but it's right across your white picket fence too. It's right in our own backyard. Before I had thought being a missionary had meant only to be overseas, but today I feel that we need more missionaries in America than abroad. During my college experience, I have felt the pain of the people here in America due to discrimination and seclusion from the church, which I am so adamantly a part of, the one that I have been called to be a missionary for. With all the pain and desire here in America, I've been questioning my calling more and more. It's a big step from knowing exactly what I've been called to do and having a heart for that, then seeing the need here and that so little is being done. But this questioning of my calling is only the first of these questionings to come. The next problem that occurred to me is the fact of me being a missionary is that I am a gay Christian. The thought arose to me, how can I be a missionary for something that I love and is so near to my heart, but yet condemns me at the same time? The General Assembly of the Church of God is not for gay people. How could I represent a belief that denies what I am? Not for the sake of me, but for what would people that I would be preaching to have to say when they found out that I am gay, and that the very establishment that I would work for classifies that as a sin. This is the main cause of me rejecting my missionary call. I do not want to lead other people astray in their beliefs and what they think of the church. I am and do feel that I was born this way, regardless of the beliefs of others. But I am unsure of whether it is a sin, or if not, whether the act is a sin. So I feel the need to find myself and my beliefs more so before I go on preaching what I've been taught rather than what I believe. I know that God is a loving God, and that regardless of my sin and choices in life, He will always love me. But no matter how hard I try, I cannot bear leading others astray. I do not want to teach them things or to live my life as an example, only for them to fail in the same ways that I have and that I do. I am more afraid of being blasphemy and hindering other souls to being led to Christ than my own. This again stems from the idea of living a gay life.
with a husband and kids. And yet if it is a sin and I am condemned for it, I don't want others to follow. Right now, I do my best to love the Lord my God with all of my heart, with my mind, my entire strength. And sometimes this is hard to do as well. As I reflect on these ideas, I see how unprepared for missions I am. And even though my calling is still very clear to me, I cannot accept with the fear of leading others astray. I remember in one of Dr. John's classes, he told me that few are those who are called, and even fewer are those that answer. That essay was written on November 20th, 2012. A year before that, almost to the date, without thinking about it, I actually wrote this. I love the Lord, even though I know that he doesn't love me. I know he doesn't want me to be gay, and I know he won't love me until I stop being this way. I will change for you. I will change for you, my God. I will be the boy that you want me to be. I will change for you. I will change for you, my God. I just want to know that you love me again. I will cast off these wicked possessions. I will cast off these wicked desires that I fear. I will cast out these thoughts that so offend thy will. I will change, I promise. I will change for you, my God. But I have something to say, too. That's not where I stand today. Today I stand with the knowledge and the power to know that there's something greater than those. If I speak in the tongues of men or of angels, but do not have love, I'm a resounding gong or a clanging cymbal. If I have the gift of prophecy and can fathom all mysteries and all knowledge, and if I have faith that can move mountains, but do not have love, I am nothing. If I give all I possess to the poor, and give over my body to hardship, so that I may boast, I have nothing. Love is patient. Love is kind. It does not boast. It is not proud. It does not dishonor others. It is not self-seeking. It is not easily angered, and it keeps no record of wrongs. Love does not delight in evil, but rejoices with the truth. It always protects. It always trusts. It always loves. It always preserves. Love never fails. Now these three remain: faith, hope, and love. But the greatest of these is love. Discerning your call is hard, but picking up your cross and carrying it is much harder. But what are you willing to do for the souls of others? What pain are you willing to endure? But the better question is, what love are you daring to feel?
It all began in my shabby little youth room, on one not-so-special day, no different from the rest. I was distracted, barely listening. I could not tell you what we were talking about. Then, out of nowhere, it hit me. Bam! Like nothing I had felt prior or have felt since. A vision. I know, it sounds crazy, but that is the only way for me to describe it. Who is that? Is that me? No way. Why would I ever do that? God, I know what you're asking me to do, but I can't do that. God, I can't speak. There's no way I would ever do that. You have the wrong guy. So I ran. From anything to do with that, to do with him. Yeah, church was still a part of my life, but I knew I could fake it. Flash forward 5 years. Time for college? What the heck is that? Warner? Sure. You'll give me lots of money? Of course I'll go. But there's something below the surface. Something deeper. Something drawing me there. What was it? What is it? Like a sweater held together by a single thread, my faith was there. Barely, just barely, but oh, it was there indeed. Can't lose, please, oh please, don't let me lose it. Trick myself. Yeah, I have to trick myself. Warner? Yeah, it's the cheapest option. Warner? Yeah, I'm going there for the money. Facade is in place. On the outside, I don't know why I'm going, but deep down, I know why. I successfully tricked myself. School starts. Nothing really changes, but there is this thing. A tugging of sorts. A hunger. A thirst. For what? No idea. Ignore it. It'll just go away, right? A year and a half goes by. It's still there, but it's stronger. Much, much stronger. Got to fill this void. Will this work? Will that work? Nothing even comes close. What is wrong with me? What is wrong with me? My life begins to fall apart. Everything comes to a halt. Depression. I've been hiding it for so long. Numb. Void. Empty. Nothing. Darkness. Darkness everywhere. 3 months later, still darkness. Took church youth gig for summer job. I need the money. I barely believe in God. No idea what I'm doing here. I'm in way over my head. Stuck in office all day by myself. Nothing to do but cry and read. I have to plan lessons. I have to read the Bible. Every day is the same. Wake up. Feel numb. Cry. Alone in office. Cry. Read Bible. Jesus. Go home. Cry. Sleep. Job continues. Now there's more Jesus, less crying. The tugging I felt for so long is no longer there, but something else is. What is this feeling? Peace? Who is this Jesus guy, anyways? Summer continues. Start actually liking this Jesus character. School starts again, and the depression is still there. Still dark. Still numb. Take ministry class for some reason. I hate all of my classes. I don't want to be in school anymore. But there's something about this ministry class. My life continues to fall apart, but this class is my safe haven. Remember the call I had so long ago? It still freaks me out, but not as much anymore. We read about Abraham, Moses, David, and Peter. What about their calls? It seems like God knew what he was doing with them. What if God knows what he's doing now? I feel a tugging again, but this time it's different. I know what I'm supposed to do, but I'm scared. Terrified even. A month goes by. The tugging is so strong, I can't take it anymore. I finally give in. Email my advisor saying I'm changing majors. And the second I click send, I begin to cry. Uncontrollably, and laugh. Uncontrollably. Something feels right. The most cathartic moment of my life. The very next day, I'm offered a youth position. Maybe God does know what he's doing. Spring semester comes around. I have to figure out what this ministry thing is all about. I enter crazy overload with religion courses, exploring God's calling, Old Testament, Christian social concern, church history. My brain can hardly handle all of the information, but I love it. I begin to figure out what it means to be called to ministry. I began to figure out what this Jesus guy was all about. This is the first time I have ever really read the Old Testament. I sense a love in there that just doesn't make sense. A caring God, a God that is always present, always coming through for his people. Is that what this is all about? Christian social concern wrecks me. How could people be this awful? People do awful things to other people in the name of Christ, and I weep. Is changing that what this is all about? We read so much in church history. So much good and so much evil done for God. Feelings of joy and sorrow surround me to the point where mere words cannot even attempt to express my feelings. The Bible studies and exploring God's calling make all the difference. I finally get to dive in. I finally begin to decipher this Jesus guy and the deity I call upon named God. This matters. I care about something. Next semester rolls around, more ministry classes, I'm so excited. Preaching, ministry internships, New Testament. Preaching begins. I'm nervous like everyone else, but as this semester continues, I come to love it. I began to find my own voice. I guess I'm kind of good at this too. I remember the vision I had as a kid, and hear God laugh. You ran from this for so long, but now this is what you love. I can't do anything but laugh with God. A word I've never heard before shows up 3 times in one day. Rehumanize. It seems to me now that this Jesus guy was all about this. He was all about taking people out of their darkness and placing them in his light. Taking them from where they are to where they deserve to be. Making them feel like human beings once again. Rehumanize. I think about my own story, and I begin to see how Jesus rehumanized me. How he took me from my dark place and placed me in his light. How he made me feel human once again. Maybe there's more to this word than I realize. In November, I go to Seattle to look into the seminary program there. The phrase of the weekend is Ma Te Vakesh. What are you looking for? The phrase cuts deep for some reason, and I cannot understand why. As I'm driving home, I close my eyes and ask God, Ma Te Vakesh. What am I looking for? And when I open my eyes, I can see only one thing. And in that moment, I realized that what I had been looking for all this time was Jesus. That through my vision, through my running, through my darkness and depression, and through this unquenchable thirst I now possessed, that all I had ever been looking for was Jesus. And because of all this, I'm beginning to understand my call as simply asking the question, Ma Te Vakesh. What are you looking for? And how can I help?
You know what I'm really excited for, Cody? That someday we're going to go on a road trip like the one we just went on now. And we're going to go to your church and see you walking out that calling and laugh that you were the kid that tried running away from God. Since we're in a storytelling mood, a story that came to mind when you were sharing, I don't think I've shared with you guys. There's this worker at a market down the street on 82nd Division that I befriended. His name was Emmanuel. His name meant God with us. How cool. I'd stop in and chat with him about what his name meant, and I'd share Jesus with him, and sometimes I'd bring him gifts, and he'd see me buying things for the people outside his shop. And he wasn't a believer yet, but he knew I was. He actually called me Nick the Christian Kid. And there was one day Emmanuel was working, and he saw a young gal running in front of his shop. Must have been like 14, 15 years old. And she was running from a guy. She was screaming for help. And as she was running, she turned and saw Emmanuel's market and bolted for it. Emmanuel ran to the door, let her in, and shut it behind him. And he yelled out at the stranger and told him, "Don't you dare come near my shop, or I will take you down. Don't you dare lay your hands on her again." Emmanuel walked in when the stranger backed down, met Sierra, tried to figure out what the heck just happened, what was going on, who was she? She was traumatized. She was sobbing and shaking uncontrollably. And he didn't know what to do. She didn't speak for even 10 minutes or so. But he prayed a prayer to God, and he didn't even know it was a prayer at the time. He said, "If there is one person that can help this girl, it's Nick, that Christian kid." And who did he see when he looked out the window of his market that day, walking towards the shop? Nick, that Christian kid. Little did I know how much of a divine encounter I was walking into that day. I just happened to be praying for people with a couple friends of mine. The girls I was with, Jessie, my fiance, and Ashley, our other friend, rushed to Sierra's side as soon as they saw her, began hugging her, comforting her. Before I even saw her, I saw Emmanuel and his bulging eyes. He was in complete disbelief that I had just shown that. As you can imagine. Though I did not know of his prayer at the time. Sierra was still shaking, staring off as though she had just seen a ghost. But we didn't know what happened to her, whether she had been molested by that guy or stalked all day or what. But we knew she needed to get out of there. We needed to get her to a safe place. So we came up with this plan where we'd break her out of the only exit and entrance to that market. Tim, Michaela's husband, we'd run back to Warner, grab their car, drive back, park it in front. When the coast was clear, girls would jump in and we'd drive to my apartment. And just as Tim and I were about to book it for Warner, I was stopped in the parking lot by a stranger. I thought, oh no, who could this be? And I recognized the man as a guy I had prayed for earlier in the day outside of a bar. He approached me and began to tell me how that night was going to be the worst night of his life, because he was going to commit suicide. But how I randomly showed up and prayed for him and saved him. I explained to him how I didn't save him at all, but that there's a Lord in heaven who created him and cares so much about him, even to the tune of giving up his own life. His name is Jesus. So Tim and I ran on from divine encounter number 2. We came back with the car. Coast was clear. The girls jumped in. We drove off to the apartment. When we got inside, Sierra broke down and wept. She couldn't comprehend why we were doing this. We were strangers. figured out she was completely stranded in Portland, had nowhere to go, no good place to go, no one to call. But her boyfriend lived across the nation with his family. If there was any way she could go there. And once we found that out, immediately our friend Ashley said, I'm going to pay for your ticket to send you out there. Spent a couple $100. And again, Sierra could not believe it. Why are you doing this? She called her boyfriend and he said the same thing. What? Who are these people? What is wrong with them? They were both so thankful they couldn't believe it. About an hour or so later, Jessie, my fiance, was alone with Sierra. And Sierra confessed to her that she had on her a pipe and crack cocaine. She told her, I don't want this to be a part of my life anymore. I want to be free from this. And Jessie and her went out to the parking lot. Sierra threw down that pipe and that junk, jumped on it, stomped on it in victory. She threw it in the dumpster. All of us came around her and proclaimed freedom in the name of Christ Jesus. I'll never forget that moment, seeing that young gal crunch that stuff under her feet in Jesus' name. She spent the night, the girls gave her clothes, and Jessie took her shopping the next morning. She let her pick any pair of shoes she wanted. She was so excited. And of course, like any middle schooler would do, she picked the most wild pair there. So colorful. And I just thought about how ironic that was. As I knew she was asking so much, why are you loving me like this? Because she hasn't experienced love like that. And the little girl in her, who expressed herself through all these many colors, I just can't even imagine the amount of brokenness she's been through in life. But thank God that I got to be part of the opportunity in loving her. Jessie even gave her old iPod. Conveniently filled it with a bunch of worship music. And even a sermon of mine. She probably didn't listen to that. And on the way to the bus station, Jessie shared her testimony. I shared the gospel. When we got there, I asked Sierra if she wanted to give her life to Jesus. She, of course, said yes. And right there in the middle of the station, Jess and I laid hands on her and prayed to God. She repeated after me, and I will never forget that prayer. It was the first time Jessie and I together led someone to the Lord. Something I pray we do thousands of times again and again the rest of our lives. I'll never forget Sierra. And I'll never forget what we told her every time she asked, why? Because Jesus loves you. And we do too. Saying goodbye was the hardest part. Felt like sending off a daughter who got befriended so quickly, fell in love with so quickly, supernaturally. It was hard on Jessie for a while, a long time. Trusting the Lord for so many unknowns. But I knew I could trust Him. Because when people most needed Him that day, He didn't fail to show up. And in fact, I got the privilege of being the ones that He sent to those who needed Him. And Emmanuel, better believe he's going to church these days.
Hi everybody, I'm Spencer Holtman. I want to thank you all for being here tonight. It means a lot to us. We've been working very hard, and without you, we wouldn't be able to share our stories. Except with each other, I guess. This is a letter that I wrote to my mom, and it's important because her story hit me at a time when I was trying to find like this sort of my calling going from college. It's a letter I wrote to her, and I'm going to read it to you. Dear Mom, this is the story of the process of finding my true self and who God created me to be in this crazy world that we live in. As you know, I tend to be a rather passionate and intense person and experience life with crazy ups and downs. It's been a long and difficult journey, and I often feel worn out already, even though I'm still so young and have so much more to discover about myself and the world around me. I've tried to find meaning in pursuing many different lives. I've tried to live the life of a drug addict, only to realize that's not my true self. I thought that I wanted to become many other things, like an addiction counselor, or a paramedic, or even a social worker. I took a class in the fall of 2013 called Exploring God's Calling. In this class, we were asked to read a book called Let Your Life Speak by Parker Palmer. In this book, I was introduced to the idea that we all have what Palmer calls a voice, a vocation. This voice speaks to us and informs us of our true self and who we were created to be in this world. So often it's tempting to listen to voices outside of ourselves that tell us that we can become anything that we want to be, and that we have freedom and the right to do so. This book challenged this idea for me. It challenged me to begin looking deep within myself, to identify the common themes and threads that God's been trying to pull together in my life, to listen to the whispers and the clues that He's been giving me along the way. One of the internships that I was able to participate in while at Warner was called the Listening Lab. This experience gave me the opportunity to listen to the stories of people who have been through particularly difficult experiences. Through hearing their stories, I began to see even deeper and more clearly the darkness that plagues the hearts of people all over the world. I began to sense that I was called to enter into that darkness with others, carrying in me the presence and the light of Christ. Shortly after I had these experiences in my education, you were diagnosed with stage 4 breast cancer. This is when everything I thought I knew about myself was called into question, and my world was turned upside down. I couldn't figure out how God could let this happen. My faith in Him wore down to the point where it was almost non-existent. I remember visiting you in the hospital, and you were too weak to breathe, and were hooked up to the machines that were draining the fluid from your lungs. You asked me to be your spiritual advisor throughout treatment, and my heart hit the floor during the greatest conflict I've ever experienced. I felt a sense of honor that you identified me in this role, mixed with a pervasive sense of inadequacy to fulfill it. Me? Really? God, I knew that you called me to do great things, but I'm too weak. I can't bear the burden, the weight of the salvation of my own mother on my shoulders. Help me. I remember watching you respond to your diagnosis with a fierce determination to heal and an exponentially growing appreciation for life. You were often confusing to me when I entered the room and you were in brighter spirits than even me. We had many talks about God and about Jesus and what all of this crazy stuff meant. I entered all our conversations about God with a sense of inadequacy and a fear that I would not have the words to speak. So I listened. I listened to your words and your heart, and I responded to you the very best that I could. Every one of our God talks, every time we left one of our God talks, I felt as if I had said the wrong thing or that I had somehow blown it. Slowly, I watched you come alive. I watched you against all odds not only begin to heal physically, but also spiritually. You began to see the hope that is offered in Christ, and you reached out to grab it. You found hope in a community of believers. I watched you get baptized. You became an inspiration to me and everyone around you. God is using you and your story to change the world for the better and in ways that are beyond worldly understanding. As you were going through your process, I was going through my own. I began to reflect on my life and listen to my heart in the voice of God in a whole new way. I began to realize that all these loose threads in my life that God has been revealing to me, they were all beginning to come together. Throughout my entire life, I've always felt like I was home in hospitals, that I've been drawn to them in particularly special ways. I began to see the common theme in the lifestyles and the vocations that I've always been drawn to. I am a crisis worker. I come alive in crisis. I was created to enter into these critical moments with people bearing the light and presence of Christ. When you ask me to be your spiritual advisor, I began to realize that the call that God has placed on my life for me is to do just that. From what I can discern right now, I will be pursuing professional hospital chaplaincy to sit alongside those who are sick and help find grace in some of life's most painful moments. Watching you come alive, begin to allow your life to speak in a whole new way, is giving me the courage to allow my life to be the same. So thank you for letting your life speak so loudly and gracefully. I hope to carry you in everything that you have taught me in my heart as I walk through hospital halls and listening to the stories of those in their darkest hour. I love you, Mom. Thanks.
Mr. Shorts, with an S, not Mr. Short. We have a new 7th grade Bible teacher, Mrs. Jackson. Please be respectful, Mrs. Jackson.
Hey guys, it's great to be teaching you today. I wanted to start off by telling you a little bit of a story about why I learned to care about the Bible and why I want to teach you about the Bible. So, I'll try not to make it boring. Okay, it all started one fateful afternoon, approximately 5 weeks before April 15th, 2014. Now, April 15th was this infamous day in the RCM department at Warner Pacific College for the kids who were enrolled in Old Testament, because this was the day that the 10-plus page Old Testament research paper was started. Can you imagine writing 10 pages on the Old Testament? So boring. Okay, so it was a noisy afternoon in the library as I creep into this back right corner of this massive cavernous room full of dusty, disgusting books. Books that, frankly, I really didn't want to read. So I plucked this book entitled The International Critical Commentary on Hosea off the shelf, and I almost audibly gagged. These pages are pulling apart. Look at this. I opened the yellow pages cautiously, being sure that no one saw what I was reading, because that's just embarrassing. And attempt to begin to engage this near Old English language. Once I got past the these and the thous, I found that what I was reading was actually interesting. What a concept. The Old Testament prophetic books could be interesting. Surprised, I continued reading into the commentary, past the passage I had chosen, and soon found that an hour had passed without my noticing. And over the next 5 weeks, I would continually creep into the back right corner, but slightly, calmly, and silently, so that nobody would still notice what I was doing, because I was still kind of embarrassed about what I was doing. And it was really hard, because at the time I was 8 months pregnant, and frankly, like the size of this big fat little whale. Through that? Did you throw that pudding in the back? Take off.
It was that guy.
Okay. Calm down. So the moment of truth came when I had to turn in this paper and find out if I had done something right or if I had been moving my little train down the right path. When I got the paper back, I was surprised to find that I had done something substantial and that I had done it sort of well. Then came summer, and with it one of the most frightening and trying times of my life, the birth of my daughter, Serenity. Almost immediately, I was thrown into this severe identity crisis. I remember a certain point in my 375 class, the one that happens your junior year of college, where we were asked to give a summary of sorts from the beginning of our time to where we were then. And I tried to pinpoint where I was at that exact moment, and I had no idea. The only thing I knew was that I was a mom and that I loved biblical studies. And I also knew that I had been encouraged by some to quit school and stay home with my baby like a good mom. I'd also been encouraged by others to utilize the babysitting opportunities one happens to have when one lives on a campus full of Christian girls with ovaries aching for tiny beings. I'll wait for questions till the end. Okay, moving on. I knew that I had a baby and that I felt this vocational pull to something to do with the Bible. Just something. That's all I knew. And I remember sitting in the classroom and confessing to my fellow students and to Jess, my professor, that I had no idea where I was or what I wanted to do with my love for the Bible. And that I was spiraling into this deep pit of depression because I, unlike the rest of my classmates, didn't even have an internship. So I felt like I was wasting my time and my money, on top of being a terrible mom who leaves her baby at home for an hour and a half at a time to go struggle through a class 3 times a day. But there was hope. For little did I know, a couple weeks later, about 3 weeks before the end of last semester, I would get the opportunity to be before you here at Kingsway Christian in Vancouver and observe a 7th grade and an 8th grade level Bible course. And as I'm sitting at this tiny little desk made for a 5'4" person with my legs dangling all over the place.
Short.
I found my vocational calling. And as I watched this class take place, something inside of me clicked, and I felt fulfilled in my vocation for the first time in well ever. And about the same time, I had to construct a final paper about the inspiration of Scripture. The goal of this was to prove that the Scriptures were valid, because God wrote them, duh. But I had to write an academic paper about it, so I couldn't just say duh. But I could never prove that the Bible was the Word. And I got really frustrated, because that's not something you can prove. Then I started thinking about what role the Bible had played in my life, and how many times the words of the Bible had spoken light into my dark places. And then I realized that there was no way the Bible couldn't be inspired, because no other piece of writing had an influence on my life like this did. Over the next couple of weeks, I would have conversation after conversation with Miss Kipp, the teacher I was observing. I realized that, yeah, this is the place for me. And throughout my childhood, I read the Bible a lot, specifically the exciting stories in the Gospels. But it wasn't until this Old Testament college research paper that I learned to own the Bible for myself. It also wasn't until this moment that I was able to claim the Bible for my own. This is my word. This is what I believe in. So this is what I want to teach you, why you should care about the Bible. Your parents pay quite a bit to push you through this schooling, and you get good grades because you must. But the Bible can't be a must or a should. It should be a want. Otherwise, you'll be left high and dry someday when your lives are no longer measured by grades. So here I am, hoping to teach you something about the Bible that will make you care. Not because you have to, but because you can. Does anybody have any questions? I told you to take off your hood. Take it off. I'm not listening until your question until you take off your
Does
hood.
Mr. Short have ovaries?
Moving on.
I came to Warner on a complete leap of faith. I transferred here from a community college on the other side of the country just because of a feeling in my gut that God wanted me to study to be a youth pastor. After I had moved here, I slowly started to adjust to not only the time zone, but the differences in the conservative Ohio country town I was raised in, to the busy liberal feel the city of Portland brings. It didn't take me long to find irony in my circumstances. As my first semester, I was sitting in an intro to missions class where we sat and talked and learned about culture shock when I was experiencing it at the exact same time.
I started to make the profession that I was a religion major, even though it was something that I didn't want to sign up for at all. I had the opportunity to journal about my thoughts about studying for ministry in a class called Exploring God's Calling. In the beginning of my journals, I started talking about the struggle I was having with my desire to be a pointer. Being a minister was something I felt I just simply wasn't suited for. First off, I didn't have the money to afford to pay to get the education I needed, and I didn't feel like I was smart enough to be here in college either. Second, I remember looking at the people in my classes as they were immersed and brought up in church most of their entire lives, and I was just the opposite. I felt like I had nothing in common with the people that I was studying with. So God, why am I even here? What do you want me to do here? At the end of all of these journals, I came to the conclusion that my conviction to do what God wanted me to do was greater than my desire to leave Warner. So, I stuck around. While sitting in the class beside the journal opportunities, in the class we talked a lot about through these calling narratives throughout Scripture. I saw myself in most of these people scattered throughout the passages that we looked at. I saw myself in the story of Peter. When Peter was talking with Jesus in his fishing boat, and Peter said, "Go away from me, for I am a sinful man." I saw myself in the story of Isaiah, when Isaiah shouted, "Woe to me, for I am a man of unclean lips." I saw myself in the story of Abraham, when Abraham was talking to the Lord in the burning bush, making excuse after excuse after excuse to not pursue what God was asking him to do, simply because he just didn't want to do it, and he didn't feel suited to do it. But in all of these negative similarities that I saw in myself in all of these stories, I found comfort in the calling of Abraham. Just as some mysterious voice that Abraham had never heard before, Abraham obeyed it when this voice told him to go away from his family and homeland, where I had done just the same, leaving my family and the place that I was raised from Ohio to move to Oregon. In the end of all of these calling stories, I found comfort in the fact that if God was with every single one of these people from beginning to end throughout what he had asked them to do, why would this same God leave me and abandon me in this journey that I've just begun? Fast forward to my senior year. I'm about ready to start taking the last batch of classes before I graduate. I have all of these questions in my mind of, am I still living into God's call if I go into youth ministry at this point? Is it the right thing to do? Is that what God really wants me to do? How could I even know for sure? With all of these questions looming in my head, a timer pops up, and it's saying that I have less than one school year to figure all of this out. So, I decided maybe I need to take a little time to listen to what God would have me say, what God would have me do in this time. That's not too hard, right? Listening to this invisible God that's been leading me this entire way. So I slow down and take some time to listen. A week goes by. Nothing. Maybe God's just taking his time. A month after that goes by. Still, I have nothing. I focus back on the timer, and now I have less than 6 months to figure out what God wants me to do for the rest of my life. Am I not living into my call if I choose not to go into youth ministry? What do I need to go into seminary or get a master's? What if I choose the right option between work or school, but I choose the wrong location? What if God wants me to stay in Oregon, but I choose to go back to Ohio? Or what if I go back to Ohio, but I stay in Oregon? If I make the wrong choice, am I not living into what God wants me to do?
Yeah.
To force myself to wrestle with these questions, I start a research paper in one of my classes focusing on this idea and concept of God's calling on an individual's life. In this research paper, I looked through this concept of calling through Scripture, my experiences, church fathers, as well as reasoning with all of these different elements. When all was said and done, I felt like I had encountered a new perspective on what it meant to really be called by God. Up to this point, I had felt like pursuing God's call in my life consisted of me making the right decisions to go down a specific path and reach a specific destination that God wanted me to reach. Up to this point, my view of calling was focused on the end of the journey and not so much focusing on where I was currently at. I felt like maybe God's calling on my life doesn't consist of a job description with a paycheck attached to it. So, ultimately, my view of calling and my perspective was changed to maybe God is calling me and possibly all of us to be with those, in the words of Cassie Trentaz, at this time, at this place, with these people. Maybe that's what God was really asking us to do. With this new perspective, I stopped focusing on what I needed to do after I graduated in May, and I started to focus more on planning the events and planning lessons at the youth group I had started in my church. I started to immerse myself and sit with the people in my church, learn who they were, and actually get to know the people I was sitting with and worshiping the Lord with. I stopped focusing on making it to graduation and being out of Warner, where I was now focused more on building the relationships with the people on campus that I had started my Warner experience with, and those people that I was living with in the dorms now. So ultimately, my call, God's call in my life, isn't so much what is God asking Josh Priest to do after May 9th of 2015, but what is God asking Josh Priest to do at 8:15 p.m. March 4th, 2015.
Did you mean marshmallows?
I'm
sorry.
What else did you thought we meant? 15 miles, and you thought you could have.
Good stories are supposed to have good endings. Good endings produce stories that we remember forever. But if I'm honest with our audience tonight, we struggled with how to end. There didn't seem to be an appropriate ending to these stories. And maybe it was because they reminded me that their stories are not concluded. That in truth, this is an arbitrary moment that happens to be right before graduation, where they will give an account for how God is calling them at this moment. And so how do we conclude this night of stories? That is really about a conclusion that is not coming to yet. And I think that maybe how we should do it is inviting you to participate. This has been a good night of stories. If you don't know everybody in front, this is Spencer Folkman, Rachel Payne, Josh Breeze, Nick Gowen, Cody Meyer, Kyla Jackson, Stephen Taylor. They are seniors in the Christian Ministry program with Religion and Christian Ministry majors here. They've got 1 minute. They want to say some thank yous to some folks in the room. So I don't care where you guys start. I'm usually on order in my class. So whoever wants to start, this is your opportunity to just say some thank yous to folks that have been in your story. Whatever you want to do.
Okay. I'll go first since I'm going to cry the longest. door over yonder by that camera. Okay, here we go. Okay. Words mother and dad make me cry. Okay, anyway, they're great. And then Corey and Molly have been a huge support to me throughout this academic journey, and I just want to thank them. And then, of course, our professors, Jess and Dr. Trentez and Dr. Carver, have really walked us through some crazy stuff. And Tony, too. Sorry. I don't know where you are, so I can't look at you. But thanks.
Oh my goodness. I guess I want to thank all of you in some way for coming and listening to us, hearing our stories and laughing and crying and doing everything that you did. I want to thank, I could do this for a while, looking around the room right now. But I'll thank my parents right now for loving me in the midst of all that chaos that you heard in my addiction. They were there and they extended love and grace every time. And in turn, it's particularly my mom, like I was able to be there for her, come around and just have this just beautiful story start to unfold that we're still in the middle of. It's just unconditional love, it's beautiful. For all my professors in the religion department that have spoken truth into my life, that have extended me grace in some harder times, that have helped me find my voice, Tony especially. I hate public speaking. And it's something I just thought I could get, I'll be a chaplain, I can kind of get away with not cultivating that skill. But it's been such a process of finding my own voice. Jace, I see you back there, you're just a wonderful human. I'm this, I love you all, thank you.
I, like many of us here, could thank all of you. I can think of Dr. Plies when in the humanities class and the endless conversations we have going back and forth between classes, to Dr. Cook, who was, by the way, the second person I ever came out to, by the way, to Megan, one of my best friends, to all the professors who have become my friends. I don't have professors, but I have teachers. And Mr. Sunshine over here.
Mr. Short.
They have, this community has become my family. And they have, and you guys all have given me the room that I needed to grow in a love and safe environment. And I don't believe that any of you actually have an idea of how big of a role that plays in my life, as well as the life of others who are going through the same thing. From Deborah in the listening labs, to my peers who teach me patience, and to the teachers who teach me how to have patience, and to Tony for how to speak, and for people just teaching me how to grow and become humble, and to do all the things that we need in life. My greatest thing in life is love, and I have it tattooed on my arm 9 times. And I believe I've never encountered that in more of a place than here. So thank you.
I would use a microphone, but I don't really think I need it. The first person that I would like to thank is Dr. Trentez. You showed me that I was smart and that this education was worth it, and I thank you so much for that. And I thank my roommates for putting up with me and living with me for 2 years or 1 year. You guys are amazing. Haley Barnick and her entire family for taking me in this year when I really needed that. And countless other people in this audience, because I know that I wouldn't still be here if it weren't for you. So thank you.
I'd like to first thank all the professors that I've had, Dr. Trentez, Dr. Carver, Jess, and just giving me the material to wrestle with, presenting me with information and struggling with me in these things. Dr. Plies, You don't know this, but during all of this depression, you were one of the voices that I heard. So thank you. To all of my friends in here who wrestled with me and who have been there for me through everything, thank you.
To thank everyone in here as well. And first, so cliche and they all expect this, but I just want to thank Jesus, who is also in this room. I would be so lost without him. And I can't wait to spend the rest of my life chasing after you, God. My parents, I love you guys so much. And I just thank you for how you've raised me. I know it wasn't easy. But I love you dearly. And my grandparents who are here, my grandma, thank you for sowing into my life so many prayers before I came to know the Lord. Thank you. And all professors, Jess, Tony, Trentez, Carver, Wise, thank you for investing in this wayward child of a student. I am indeed going to graduate, and Dr. Kevin as well. And to my lovely fiance, Jessica Swink, the model, drop dead gorgeous. I thank you that the rest of our life is going to be serving the Lord Jesus and introducing a whole lot of Sierras to the Lord. Can't wait to do that with you.
Am I always last in this? First, I guess I kind of have to cheat because my first thanks has to go to my family back home. All of the support they gave me in between each semester going home, where I didn't feel like I wanted to come back. So I have to thank them so much. I also want to thank Dr. John. Hopefully he can see this film. But I guess for the people in the room, I want to thank the student body because you guys have become a family here. Thank the professors. You guys have pushed me so far. I want to thank these guys in the class too. Just like I know you guys have pushed each other so far, and I feel like I've been pushed so much farther. So thanks.
In my class, I try not to talk a lot, but I try to talk last. Religion department here at Warner Pacific College, Dr. Casatrinas, Dr. Steve Carver, myself, Dr. Johnson in absentia in Southeast Asia, who's invested so much in this life. We'd like to thank you for making this part of your night. There's a lot of people here who have been invested in these students beyond all of us. For lots of shout outs to Tony Kriz. The shout outs to the Listening Lab, his mentor, Deborah Lloyd, who's here. Jolyn Davison imagined that whole thing. They don't know JoJo probably, but she thought of that whole thing, and Spencer talks about it. It's just beautiful. Dr. Cook, again, thank you for all of your trust and support as we've engaged this. It is really great to get a chance to be in these students' lives. You don't know this. You are my night of stories. You are my story to talk about what my calling is. I feel like I should thank my parents who are in the fourth row. But it's to be invested into your story and the calling of your life is an absolute gift. Spencer, it was evident the first time we met you that this incredible journey that you've been on has caused you to have compassion greater than what I think you even knew. Like, you have an ability to see into someone's life and not having needed to walk in their shoes. Like, your gift for that is so clear, and it was evident when we first met you, even before Mom got cancer. And somehow God has had a plan for you that has just been amazing. And it has just been such a great part to be a part of your journey in the little ways. Stephen, your depth of commitment in the midst of rejection is an incredible sign of calling. It's an evident that you are grabbing a hold of what it means to be called by Jesus Christ to his church and to his kingdom. And your perseverance in that has been incredible. This community has been proud to stand with you. I pray that this tension will just fuel for you a life of love that continues to grow. And thank you for your trust and lots of hard conversations. Michaela, it seems so clear to me that from your offering tonight that somehow the imperfect magic of a junior high school, where are you at? The imperfect magic of a junior high school. And there's this great part of the story she didn't tell where should I tell it? Yeah. Okay, so not that I say too much. Where junior high students like, you don't want to do this. This kind of stuff is boring. You don't want to teach Bible. And she takes that as a challenge. You have a calling that you have found in your struggles. Deep within the Christian spiritual tradition, and we see it alive today in these students, is this notion that that which we struggle deeply with is often the grounds of our calling. And I didn't tell them tonight that their assignment is to tell us about your struggle with calling. I just said, talk about your emerging approach to calling. And they all did it. And I think that's so evident with you, Michaela. The ground of your struggle with Bible and the ground of your struggle is the place of your calling. And thank you for letting us in. Rachel, that dynamic I would challenge you to see in your life also. You seem to be at a perpetual crossroads. And at times your struggles debilitate you, and at times they move you forward. May you find freedom. And I want that so much for you. It is my prayer for you. That somehow I think listening to your own story in the struggles of that, you will find healing for other people, which is your greatest hope. And I thank you that you've taught us that. Cody, it is no surprise that having dealt with God through depression and confusion, that you are working with youth. You know, a lot of students come in on the front end and say they're going to work with youth. Few on the back end do. And you have persevered, my friend. Your story is evidence of a divine calling. Take your love, your education, your story. Continue to challenge not only your church, but the greater church. You have so much to say, even bigger than what I think you've come to